Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to continue and wait for others to join, but please take a moment to sign in on the document that was just shared in the chat. We'll be starting in another minute or so. If your connectivity allows, we invite you to turn on your cameras so we can see who all's here as if we were meeting in person. We'll give everyone another little minute or so to sign in. I think we can get started. So welcome again, everyone. My name is Susanna Mari, and I am the Deputy Activity Director for IDEAL. We thank you all for joining us for this first day of the stakeholder consultation focused on the use of theories of change in resilience food security activities. I will be co-facilitating this consultation with my colleague, Jenny Haddle, who will start us off with a few tech instructions.
Thanks, Suzanne. So welcome, everyone. My name is Jenny Haddle. I'm the Senior Advisor for CLA on IDEAL. So before we start, we'd like to let you know that we'll be providing interpretation during this meeting. Everyone must select a language, so you have to select a language. Please go ahead, click on the globe in the bottom of your Zoom screen and select either English or French. So you can see some instructions on the slide there to help you. So this functionality isn't available during breakout rooms. That means you have to remember to select your language again when you come back into plenary. If you have any technical issues during the meeting, please send a chat message to anyone with IDEAL. So you can see people have IDEAL, those of us who are working with IDEAL as the first part of their name, and we'll do our best to assist you. So let's take a minute to rename ourselves as if we were picking up our tags from a table before an in-person meeting. So as instructed on the screen, again, you can see some directions right there on the screen to help you change your name on Zoom. As instructed, please click on Participants in the bottom of your Zoom screen. Find yourself, then click More and Rename. So we'd love for everyone to use their preferred name and their organization. So like you can see how I've renamed myself IDEAL Jenny Haddle. And then for a couple best practices as we start to work together for this online consultation. We'd love for us all to be on camera as much as possible, understanding that some people do have bandwidth issues. So if that's an issue, of course, please keep your camera turned off. But it does help us to put a name to a face. When you're not speaking, please make sure to mute yourself to avoid any noise disturbances in the background. And if you'd like to speak out loud, you can use the feature raise hand under the reactions button. So at any time, feel free to write in the chat if you have any comments or questions. We'll be monitoring the chat. And finally, we'll be sharing screens during most parts of the meeting. So feel free to select your preferred Zoom ratio. We'd also like to inform you that we will be recording the plenary discussions. So just so that you know, over the next 2 days, that's what the plenary discussions will be recorded, but the breakout rooms won't be recorded. So the breakout rooms will just be a conversation amongst the colleagues. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Karen Romano, IDEAL's Activity Director, for a few opening remarks.
Okay, hi everybody and welcome. For those of you who are less familiar with IDEAL, the IDEAL activity is funded by USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance to address knowledge and capacity gaps expressed by the food security community, and to support the design and implementation of emergency and non-emergency food security activities. You can learn more about IDEAL by visiting the link on the screen or clicking the link in the chat box. So an important part of IDEAL's work is providing structured opportunities for implementing partners and BHA to engage with each other on critical issues affecting food security programming and to identify solutions together. In this stakeholder consultation, we'll discuss enablers and challenges related to the use of theories of change and generate recommendations for how to improve the use of theories of change throughout the RFSA program cycle. So what distinguishes a stakeholder consultation from any other meeting? The stakeholder consultation is intended to be a highly participatory process between implementing partners and BHA. Next slide, please. So the stakeholder consultation provides an opportunity for peer-to-peer dialogue. It's a venue for implementing partners and BHA representatives to articulate challenges in a safe learning space and hear challenges faced by each other with an open mind. It's an opportunity to problem solve together. And it's a space for BHA and implementing partners to work together on refining or crafting new approaches to improve food security activities. So with that framing, we want to invite all of you to engage in thoughtful and honest conversations while providing a space for all voices to be heard. So once again, welcome everyone to IDEAL's second stakeholder consultation. We're just so thrilled you could be here and we're excited for the work ahead over these 2 days. I'm now going to hand over to Arif Rashid, who serves as the division chief for BHA's Design, M&E, and Applied Learning Division, for a few remarks. So over to you, Arif.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I welcome you all to this stakeholder consultation meeting on the theories of change. I'm sure my BHA colleagues are very excited and grateful to engage with you in this consultation. I genuinely thank IDEAL for organizing the stakeholder consultation meeting. As you know, BHA values these stakeholders consultation meetings, which have in the past led to many important changes in the way RFSAs have been designed and they are implemented. Your feedback helped to design the refine and implement approach, and some of you probably participated in series of consultation meeting that was organized to get your feedback to design the refine and implement. These consultation meetings provide an opportunity for BHA and partners peer-to-peer dialogue, discuss issues, and address the problems together. I would like to reiterate, as Karen noted, this is a safe learning space to hear challenges faced by others with an open mind. It doesn't matter whether you are working for the donor agency or for an implementing organization. It is also extremely important to listen to the field. Who implements these RFSAs? Who use these theories of change on a regular basis? We really invite all of you to engage in this discussion, express your ideas, and explore solutions. We value the opportunity to learn and make recommendations to improve program quality. As you know, we have come a long way since we started to require theories of change in the application, I believe it was in 2015. We heard from the previous stakeholder consultations that theories of change was a very useful tool for mapping pathways to change, but also a complex tool and often misunderstood. We know that you engage in a significant amount of work on the RFSA TOCs. There was a significant amount of work goes into develop a TOC at the application phase, and then refine it during the refinement phase, and then continue to refine it, or revisit the theories of change as an adaptive management tool along the way of implementation. So we truly want you to have an open mind to discuss the challenges and also suggest potential solutions. We look forward to engaging with each other on the strengths and challenges of using TOCs in implementation and working together toward recommendation that may improve the overall effectiveness of the RFSAs. We do not want to throw the baby out of the bathwater. We definitely want to improve it, make it simple, make it more user-friendly, make it a useful tool so that people, our colleagues in the field who are using it to design intervention, to refine intervention, to implement it, to design the monitoring and evaluation, they can use it without significant challenges. Our common goal is to design a more effective project and use adaptive management to continue to make the interventions relevant and effective, using the learning along the way. So how can we improve the TOC to make it a more user-friendly and effective design? That's, I believe and hope, that we will be discussing in the next few days. Please note that BHA staff cannot answer questions regarding past, current, and future procurement. So with that, thank you all. Thank you for inviting me to this exciting event. And I look forward to have a productive discussion and come to a solution-oriented set of recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Arif. And thank you for setting the stage for the next 2 days. So we're going to give you an overview of what that looks like now. So here's our agenda. In just a minute, we will hear from 3 partners who will share with the larger group some of their experience using TOCs. We'll then go into small groups to get to know each other a little better and discuss what resonated with us from that panel. Most of today and tomorrow will be spent in breakout rooms to discuss each of the themes that are guiding this consultation. These breakout discussions will not be recorded. We will be taking notes and not associating any names or organizations with those discussion notes. So like Arif and Karen has said, we invite you to be open with those discussions. Following each breakout room, we will convene back in plenary to prioritize recommendations as a group. And finally, at the end of day 2, we'll take all of those recommendations and do another prioritization exercise so that IDEAL, BHA, and all our partners have a list of recommendations to follow up on in the coming months. I'm going to hand it over to Jenny now.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I'm really excited about this panel. I think it's going to be interesting to hear from some of our implementing partners who shared a lot of interesting best practices during the focus group discussions and key informant interviews. So we're going to hear from 3 implementing partners today. I'm briefly introduce them to you. First, we have Alex Bekunda, Chief of Party with World Vision, with the Noba Jatra activity in Bangladesh. We have Gregory Makabila, Deputy Chief of Party with CRS on the IFA activity in Ethiopia. And John Paul Nyeko, Senior M&E Advisor, ABSI, on the Graduating to Resilience activity in Uganda. So welcome, guys. We're real excited to hear from you. So let's jump right in. The first question that I have for you is directed to Alex and John Paul. Let's start with you, Alex. How do you prepare for formal TOC reviews, and is there a certain process that you follow?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenny, and good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, so that's a really very good question. Basically within Noble JATRA, what we have done is that, we've been intentional, especially around with senior leadership in engaging, both within the project as well as within the organization to really bring together, different team members to kind of like really have a mini TOC review. That's what we call it. And this is done at the field level, where at each field office, team members effectively go through, the ongoing analysis, but at the same time also situational awareness. Based on the different pathways that have been developed, what are those emerging, what's that emerging information that is influencing or informing the different interventions? And through those conversations that involve, field-based staff, as well as M&E team members, as well as the knowledge management team, that information now comes up at a bigger forum where now including all now the senior team members, we review those discussions and effectively develop a coherent and review what it is that we need to reflect on in terms of like developing a much more informed TOC. And this field office discussions that we call mini TOCs effectively basically look at the diagrams and the different pathways and the teams on the ground who are really doing the implementation are able to kind of like give that information that can support in informing, how even the participants themselves, what is the feedback that we're getting from community leaders? How do they feel about these interventions? So that's how we have actually, gone through that process that informs the eventual formulation or designing of the TOC review. And within Noble JATRA, this was done in 2018, and this was supported also with a midterm review. And so that midterm review of the project also, reflected on, kind of like came up with some new recommendations. And so having that midterm review at the same time having input from the field level as well as community leaders enabled us to develop, a robust and really very strong TOC that has supported the successful implementation of the activity up to now. Yeah, over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alex. That's very interesting. John Paul, would you like to share your approach to TOC review?
Thank you so much, Jenny. Good morning, good afternoon. Yes, just as Alex was saying, the preparation starts right early enough. For us, we organize the theory of change to run for about three to a half a day in a workshop setting where we schedule it after our annual results are already collected, analyzed, and with enough time to revise the theory of change, the M&E plan, the log frame, and the peers for the subsequent implementation here. And prior to the actual workshop, we always gather all the necessary information that is needed to inform the actual review. We select the key stakeholders that we think will fit well during the actual review moment. And these stakeholders are the ones that come together in that 3 days deliberating on the actual review of the theory of change. And during the actual review of the theory of change, we do quite a lot of exercise that helps guide the process and enable us go systematically as we do the 3 days. And among the key exercises that we do includes at the beginning, understanding the theory of change itself, so that all the stakeholders get to understand the concept of the theory of change. We get to understand the terminologies that are used to guide the process before we could move to the actual review. And during the review now, we do quite additional exercises that we do, including what we call sticky note, for example, sticky note exercise, where we do plot a color on each of the output, outcome, purpose, sub-purpose, to determine if they are being achieved, or they are partially achieved, or they are not achieved completely, based on the evidences that we have collected and analyzed, and comparing the actuals that we have found with the targets. So there we could probably assign a color green if a particular result has been achieved, or partially achieved, yellow, or kind of red for not achieved. So that will give us a general picture in the overview of the actual theory of change, how it looks in terms of the different pathways leading to our achievement of the goal. And then we have another exercise that we always do called the pathway exercise. And this pathway exercise, always we review the logic pathways, right from the output to the goal for the different pathways. And we also review the assumptions along the pathways based on the evidence that we have plotted during the sticky note exercise. So it builds from the previous exercise that we have done. And after that, we do what we call the dot exercise, which kind of concludes the entire review now. At the point of reaching the dot exercise, we would have already kind of revised and adjusted the theory of change to fit within the findings and the evidences that we have collected. So the dot exercise help us now review the revised theory of change and compare the information in the log frame to ensure that all the outputs, outcomes, sub-purpose, and goal have sufficient monitoring indicators to detect the change annually or more frequently in the subsequent year of implementation. So when we conclude with that, then we already have our theory of change set for the subsequent year, and we just do different revisions of the PRs and the rest of the other documents that guides the monitoring and evaluation of the theory of change. Over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jean-Paul. So I'm hearing some interesting themes involving local partners, lots of data gathering, tools and exercises that make it helpful to review the TOC and break it down into simpler bite-sized pieces to understand as you're doing the review process. So I think moving into the next question, the idea of involving local partners is very relevant. And I'd like to take this question and ask Greg and Alex again. I'll start with you, Greg. Can you describe your experience with sharing and reviewing the project's TOC with local partners and stakeholders? And are there any approaches or good practices that you would recommend?
Thank you so much, Jenny. So we have what we call internally quarterly reflection and review events with partners, which happen after the reporting period. And the idea is to look at all the data that has come into our hands and into our reports, and we use it and we look at it critically with the partners to identify how can we review the theory of change. So to make this more responsive to TOC review, we developed a standard facilitation guide, because the RFSA is a big initiative and you want to have as many people as possible. So we realize it's much easier when you do these reviews during technical working group meetings. So during those TWG meetings, we meet with the partners and the staff, and in terms of their technical areas, and we look at the TOC together during those sessions, and they've been very productive because they stopped us from looking at TOC as an annual event for review, rather than instead we look at it more frequently, which is giving us more information and allowing us to track more closely areas that need to change. And this is very important because of the current changes in the context within Ethiopia, which change more frequently than we thought they would be changing. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Alex, is there anything you'd like to share in terms of how you socialize to local partners?
Absolutely, thank you so much, Jenny. Look, I'm building off on what Greg has said. I think also the other thing that we usually do is that I think it's really very important to identify and select the right resource person. And because of, again, the size as well as the number of different thematic areas, it can be quite a daunting task for to really comprehend and really have everything into for everybody to kind of understand how all the interventions or activities are integrated. So that's really number one. And then number two is really having those planned meetings with expertise, the concerned expertise, and one of the things that we have done within the activity has been really bringing to the fore our M&E team as well as the knowledge management team to really map out an agenda and really finalize those supporting documentations that would really support teams to inform, the interpretation as well as the understanding of this of the TOC. And this is really again informed by a program documentation or narrative that describes how each intervention is designed and how it will be implemented. And then another one is really being intentional in speaking to the local partners around identifying or collecting transformative stories from the field, because by doing this also it helps in terms like also visualizing how the change in the TOCs is also taking place. So this is something also that we have been really very intentional about, also an approach that we do as well. And then obviously finally is making sure that there is budgeting as well as a planning that is put in place for having staff come together and prepare and plan, because it can be you have to be really very patient. And so as an activity, it's very critical to actually have that planned for in your respective budgets. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Alex. I have one quick follow-up question for you, Greg. When we were interviewing, you mentioned that you found local partners using the TOC that you gave them to dry bricks in the field. And I'm wondering if you could share how it is that you helped partners understand the importance of TOC. What's the step you took after that to help people understand?
So this was during our initial moments of trying to sell the theory of change concept to the partners and even to our own staff. So like I said, we have this session plan whereby we go to the technical working group and then we put the theory of change on the wall. We go through some of the steps that were mentioned by John Paul. And at the end of the day, we've identified a pathway that we need to focus our effort on and improve on it. And that's how we really get to adaptation. So one day I finished this session, and when I came back to Addis from the field, I realized I couldn't see the theory of change, and it was big. We searched for it, and we finally found it. And we have this intervention that we call microflash, and the partners were using the theory of change to dry the bricks of the microflash. So we really had to change the approach and really help the partners understand this. So from that time, continuous engagement, really meeting them, making sure we had two partners, and we assigned an individual M&D staff to each partner to really take part in the partner reflection events so that they get to support the partner in the process of understanding the theory of change. And then I can comfortably tell you, our partners understand the theory of change as much as our staff, not at all levels, because the understanding at the frontline level is slightly different than at the higher level. But even for the frontline staff, we translated the theory of change into a panorama, the higher level of theory of change, and they can easily tell you why they are doing interventions and how the interventions are linking to each other. We made them feel comfortable about understanding it. So really continuously engaging the partners, explaining to them, showing them how those pathways relate, doing those dot exercises, the pathway exercises, mining the assumptions together is one of the ways of getting partners to understand. But it doesn't take a day. There have to be sufficient post and reflective events to really create interest and commitment from the different partners, and even in the partners, different levels of staff. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'm hearing that consistency is extremely important when socializing the theory of change. So I have one more question, and this is for John Paul and Greg. Can you describe a time when reviewing the TOC prompted an adaptation to your interventions? And would you eventually have made the adaptation even without the TOC? John Paul, can we start with you?
Thank you, Jenny. I'll give a little bit of a background of my activity that I bring the example well. Graduating to resilience activity is refine and implement activity that is being implemented here in Uganda. And we are now in year 5. So the main goal is to graduate extremely poor refugee and Ugandan households from conditions of food insecurity and fragile livelihood to self-reliance and resilience. And the goal is achieved through two main purposes. One is improving household food availability within the household and nutrition status of the household members. And then the other one is about improving the economic status of the household members. So during our year one theory of change review, we noticed some interesting scenario in one of the pathways for improving household food availability level and nutrition status. In this theory of change pathways, we had three main activities that we had set to do to be able to achieve the actual purpose and ultimately leading to achieving the goal. And one of the activities was enrolling our households into what we call farmer field business schools activities, where we train them on different agronomy practices and also related to a particular selected value chain that they are interested in. And then another one is linking them to quality and affordable agricultural input dealers. And then the third activity was around forming a production and marketing groups where they are able to bulk their items together, they're able to sell as a group, they're able to have bargaining powers in terms of accessing inputs or buying inputs from the different input dealers. And doing these three activities, we expected that it will lead us to enabling our households increase the use of their improved smart agriculture, improve on their agronomy practices, and also increase access to inputs, affordable inputs. And when they achieve this, we expected them to increase their agricultural productivities. And when the agricultural productivities increase, then we are expecting them to be improving on their household food availability and their nutrition status. That was our pathway. So during the review of our year one review, we realized that looking at the different pathways and with the exercise of the dot exercise and the exercise that we did, we realized that the pathway was green, leading to the goal. And yet there was one activity that we didn't implement, and that was production and marketing group related activities. The other two we had implemented. So we were expecting that the pathway wouldn't give us green the entire way all to the goal. But when we realized that it was giving us green all the way without implementing production and marketing groups, we decided to just drop the activity in the subsequent year of implementation, because we realized that maybe the activity is not relevant anymore, since we already achieved our goal with these two activities that are leading us to the actual goal of the activity. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you, Jenny.
That's very interesting. Greg, do you have an example you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I have an example, and most of our changes have come from our contexts monitoring, because in Ethiopia, a lot of changes in the context influence how we implement programming. But I'll share that later. But we have these things we call community conversation groups. We have a big component within our programming on gender and youth empowerment. And one of the things we try to achieve within our implementation is to make sure by the end of the program, at least 30% of the people who are benefiting or having good outcomes are youth, like 30% are youth. So when we looked at our IPTT in 2019, we had only hit around 12% of the participants of community conversation groups being youth. So this is the trick. The community conversation group are leaders and within communities. And we have people who have capacity to lead and they're youth, but they are simply not taking part in those groups. That means the youth outside those groups did not even have an audience to talk to them. That was affecting our theory of change, because it's affecting the entire, what we used to call the SPX, the gender and youth empowerment result area. So we took to the technical working group meeting and we had a detailed discussion, and the team agreed that we have to go down and find out why are the youth not taking part in the group. Just monitoring discussions with the communities after the discussion in the theory of change, we noticed that the assumption we had is that the youth are able and willing to take part in the groups at the same time with the adults. And that was not an assumption that was holding true. It was an implicit assumption. So to address that issue, we agreed to try and form what we called the youth-only community conversation groups. And as you'd expect, the numbers came high. So the other challenge was, how do we make sure that separation is not complete, so that there's a way that the integration comes back together and they meet. So created a platform whereby, yes, there are separate community conversation groups, but there's a way of meeting and making sure there's shared discussions. And that's how we managed to up our numbers. By the time we are hitting 2021, we were at almost 28, 29% of that. So that's how we used the theory of change discussion to think through and change our youth participation targets. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. Those are two really interesting examples of how theory of change has at least helped a project to think through their pathways and consider project adaptations. So what I'd like to do now is just open up the panel and see if there's anybody, any of the participants in the room that have questions for Alex, John Paul, or Greg. You can raise your hand, or you can drop your question directly in the chat box, and we will direct it to the panelists. Hi, Lisa. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. Each of you on the panel has talked about specific exercises that you've done with your team and with partners and perhaps also with community members. Did you have to develop these exercises on your own? And have you been able to share those exercises outside of your particular award across your agency or with other agencies? Over.
Thanks, Lisa. Who'd like to go first?
I think I can go first. Thank you, Lisa. The exercises have been developed over time. Most of them, like we have an exercise that we call the mining of the theory of change. And basically what we do here is just to really try to look at our implicit assumptions about our pathways. The pathway is very explicit. You can see the outcomes and how they feed into each other. But within those pathways, we have implicit assumptions within that. So this exercise is what we have used in what we call in CRS, the evaluative thinking approach. We have shared this widely within and outside CRS, and we have developed facilitation resources that others can access to utilize the same exercises. The session plan I talked about uses this exercise of mining assumptions to get teams to really identify what are we assuming about our intervention that is not available on the theory of change, so that we can go beyond what we see on the TOC to think if we're having any other implicit assumptions that can help us to think better about the intervention. Thank you.
Thanks. Alex or
Okay.
John Paul?
Yeah, I can go second. Thank you. Yeah, these exercises have been so useful to us. And I can say that our reference point was from the ideal different materials that have been developed over time. And through the capacity building of ideal, they introduce us to their various materials, including the exercises, including reference tools that we could use to enhance our implementation of the theory of change review. So we took that up within our activity. We contextualized it a bit to fit within our context. And we decided to use those materials to guide the review of our theory of change. And yes, in AFC, specifically for my entity, in AFC, we were not used to the theory of change until we engage in this current graduating to resilience activity. So the exposure also helped us move a bit away from our traditional results framework that we used to do for most of our design and implementation of our activities into the theory of change. And I think so many of our activities right now, leave alone USAID funded, we are using the theory of change approach to be able to do the design and also review the performance of our activities. And all this is being done using the materials that Graduating to Resilience contextualized and reference from the ideal different materials. Over to you.
Great, thanks. Is there anything you want to share?
No, I think I was just going to say that, again, in terms of like those exercises, I think for us, what we have done, which is really very simple to support the teams to internalize as well as conceptualize these TOCs, has been, the visualization, kind of like, printing them on PVC, big PVC. Now, obviously, in the context of Bangladesh, that's readily available, and we took full advantage of that. So that's something that we have done, and and we have seen also that being also across the country in other offices that are actually implementing the similar projects to actually borrow the same approach. So that is something that has been done, and really people have and the teams have actually has enabled the teams to internalize, but at the same time also when they are going to the community to the implementation, to also think of those transformative changes they're seeing there, because that also comes back and feeds into the pathways. Yeah, so yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Okay, thank you.
Jenny, just to add,
Yep.
Before we close,
Yep.
Another thing is that the RFSAs in Ethiopia, the 3 RFSAs or the 4 RFSAs in Ethiopia, we work very closely. So in terms of sharing this material, we don't just send the material. For example, CRS had a CLA workshop a couple of weeks ago, and all the M&Ds and the CLA leads from the various RFSAs took part in that workshop, not just as participants, but as facilitators. So we get to look at those material together with the other RFSAs, not just like sending the materials, but really using those materials actively within the same workshop. I think that was very helpful for us as a team.
Wonderful. Thanks, Greg. I see we have 3 hands raised, and unfortunately, we don't have time to take all the questions, but I'm going to ask you guys if you could put your questions in the chat so that we can capture your question, and then keep it in your mind. We are going to be discussing theories of change and sharing all kinds of different relevant examples through the next 2 days. So yeah, I would encourage you to hold on to your question, put it in the chat so we have a record of it. And what we're going to do right now, well, first of all, thank you, Greg and Alex and John Paul, for sharing all of your fantastic best practices. That was a really positive way to start off this collaborative exchange on theory of change. So thank you so much. And then what we'd like to do now is invite everyone to engage a little bit further on what has been discussed in some breakout rooms. It's just a chance to get to know each other a little better, break the ice, and also kind of get the wheels turning on theory of change in your own projects or your experience with theory of change. So we'll ask you to start by introducing yourself and share with the group something that was shared during the panel discussion that resonates with you and your experiences with theories of change. You have about 10 minutes. Are there any questions before we get you into groups? If not, I think it would be wonderful to go ahead and open up the breakout groups and get to know each other a little bit better.
Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. So you may need to reselect either English or French using the globe interpretation feature. So we hope that this was a fruitful start to our upcoming conversations. Before we dive into those groups, we're going to take a look at our objectives. So this consultation's main objective is to improve the overall effectiveness of using the TOC as an adaptive management tool throughout the RFSA program cycle. So we aim to do that by giving partners in BHA the opportunity to engage with each other on the strengths and challenges of using theories of change and implementation. developing ideas to improve the effectiveness of using theories of change, and working together towards recommendations that may improve the TOC guidance and support. So those recommendations that we make will be captured in a post-event report, and IDEAL and BHA will meet together to create an action plan for prioritized recommendations. So how did we get to the themes that we'll be discussing today? In preparation for this consultation, IDEAL conducted qualitative outreach with IPs through focus group discussions, including 36 partners from 6 organizations representing 15 RFSAs. As you can see on your screen, roles of the interviewees were diverse, and interview questions were designed to gather partners' perspectives on TOC use, value, and effectiveness in RFSA implementation. We also reached out to BHA colleagues through a survey, and although we did not have a large number of responses, what we heard from BHA largely aligned with what we heard from IPs. So across this pre-consultation process, 4 main themes emerged that will guide our consultation, which I hope you are familiar with from the document that we sent late last week. First, the theory of change is a powerful visual tool, providing a dynamic yet complex picture of the activity. Socializing the theory of change to all levels of the activity, from leadership to local partners, is a difficult but critical task. That the interdependent relationship of the learning agenda, M&E system, and theory of change provides a rich amount of data for adaptive management, but prioritizing what adaptations to make is still difficult. Finally, bringing people together for theory of change review is valuable, but resource intensive and can feel ineffectual if proposed changes are not met with flexibility and timely approval. Today, we'll focus on themes 1 and 2, and tomorrow we'll focus on themes 3 and 4. For the first theme, we know that food security is a complex issue, and the theory of change is able to visualize that complexity in ways that other tools and reports cannot. And we heard from several partners that having the theory of change picture posted can serve as a quick reference in meetings and discussions. The theory of change can help staff visualize how their individual contributions are leading to the highest level outcomes. However, we also heard over and over again that complexity can limit the usefulness of the theory of change to a handful of technical specialists, M&E, and learning staff. For the second theme, we heard from IPs that understanding the top level results, as we just noted, not just the interventions that they are tasked with, can motivate staff and partners and community stakeholders. We also heard that activity leadership, embracing and championing the TOC, can be a galvanizing force for decision-making. However, not everyone has an equal understanding of the theory of change. And sometimes because it simply has not been translated to the local or even working language, but also because, as we've already noted, it is complex and few staff have received formal training. I'll now hand it over to Jenny to get us started with the first small group activity.
Wonderful. Thanks, Suzanne. So now it's time to dig in and actually start the work.